All right, welcome everyone to the deep dive. We're your hosts, and we're here to help you understand, really understand the most fascinating and kind of complicated topics out there. Today, we're going deep on something that's been generating a ton of buzz, Google's brand new Gemini 2.5. Buckle up. This is a big one.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like the AI world just got a major upgrade. We've been poring over Google's official blog post on the keyword, the one where they announce all the cool new stuff. Plus, some really insightful YouTube videos from Theo, who's over at t3.gg, and Julian Goldie, SEO.
Yeah, Julian Goldie always brings the energy.
Well, he does.
Yeah.
And between those three sources, I think we've got a really good grasp of what Gemini 2.5 is all about.
Exactly. And that's our mission for this deep dive, right? To boil it all down for you, figure out what this new model can do and what it all means for the future of AI, and importantly, how accessible this powerful tech is becoming for, well, everyone. So I guess the first thing that jumps out is the name, Gemini 2.5 Pro. It doesn't sound like just a little tweak. Google's calling it their most intelligent AI model ever. A real thinking model designed to tackle the really, really hard problem.
Oh, yeah. And this is just the first taste of what 2.5 has to offer. We're talking about an experimental version of 2.5 Pro, the very cutting edge. They're still refining it, but even in this early stage, it's already making a big splash, like debuting right at the top of the El Marina leaderboard.
And not just by a little bit, right? The blog post makes a point of saying it's by a significant margin. And remember, folks, the El Marina leaderboard measures what real people prefer. So this suggests that Gemini 2.5 Pro feels more natural, more intuitive, more capable in those day-to-day interactions compared to other AI models out there. It's not just about raw power. It's about an AI that really gets how humans expect a truly helpful assistant to behave.
Exactly. And it's not just about user perception. The performance on the hardcore benchmarks, like the technical tests they use to compare AI models, is also really strong. Gemini 2.5 Pro is leading the pack on a lot of those standard benchmarks for coding, math, and science. That tells you something about how much its core capabilities have improved.
Okay, so we've got a potentially game-changing AI on our hands. And the good news is it's not just locked away in some Google lab. It's available right now for people to try out.
Right. You can access it in Google AI Studio. And if you're already a Gemini Advanced subscriber, you can also use it through the Gemini app.
And for those of you who need to use it at a larger scale, access through Vertex AI is on the way. They haven't announced the pricing for production use yet, but that should be coming soon. Oh, and one more thing for the AI nerds out there. Google recently, on March 26th, they put out an update about some new evaluations they've been doing that focus on what they call MRCR.
Multi-round coreference resolution. Say that 5 times fast.
I know, right? But basically, it's all about the AI's ability to keep track of what you're talking about throughout a whole conversation, like who's who, what's what, without you having to repeat things constantly.
So less like talking to a goldfish, more like talking to, a really sharp assistant who actually remembers what you said 2 minutes ago.
Exactly. For you, our listeners, this means smoother, less repetitive interactions as the AI keeps that context in mind from one turn to the next. It's a big deal for making these AI models feel more natural and helpful.
So what we're seeing here is a super powerful AI model that's becoming increasingly available. You mentioned reasoning earlier, which is a word that gets thrown around a lot with AI. Yeah. What does it actually mean in this context, and how is Gemini 2.5 Pro taking reasoning to the next level?
Okay, that's a great question. When we talk about reasoning in AI, we're talking about something way more sophisticated than just recognizing patterns or spitting out memorized facts. We're talking about the AI's ability to analyze information deeply, to draw logical conclusions based on that analysis, to grasp context, subtle nuances, and ultimately to make really informed decisions.
So it's less about memorization and more about genuine understanding, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And Gemini 2.5 Pro is demonstrating this with some pretty amazing results on those really challenging reasoning benchmarks I mentioned earlier, specifically GPQA and AM 2025.
Yeah.
What's really interesting here is that it's achieving these top scores without relying on what they call test time techniques, which are basically ways to boost performance that can also really jack up the cost.
Okay, so it's not just about throwing more computing power at the problem. It's about genuine smarts, genuine understanding.
Right. And then there's this benchmark called Humanity's Last Exam. Now, that's a name that grabs your attention.
It does. Sounds a bit dramatic.
It is. And that's the point. It's a data set designed by experts from all sorts of fields to try and capture the absolute bleeding edge of human knowledge and reasoning. Think like the ultimate test.
Wow.
Yeah, and on this ridiculously hard benchmark, Gemini 2.5 Pro scored 18.8% across all the models they tested, without even using any external tools.
Okay, so 18.8% might not sound like a lot at
Yeah,
first.
but you got to remember, we're talking about AI models grappling with the very limits of what we humans know and can figure out.
Hmm.
In that context, this score is actually considered state-of-the-art. It really shows how far we've come in building AI that can engage with these super complex, knowledge-rich questions.
Okay, so we've got a model that can really think through tough problems. Another area where they're highlighting big progress is advanced coding. Theo was especially excited about this in his video. What's going on there?
Theo's right to be excited. Google says there's been a big leap in coding performance with Gemini 2.5 compared to the previous version, 2.0. And get this, they're saying even more improvements are on the way. The model's gotten really good at creating visually impressive web applications and what they call agentic code applications.
Okay, so hold on. Agentic code applications, what does that even mean?
Well, imagine an AI that doesn't just write a piece of code, but can actually test it, debug it, and even deploy it all on its own. That's the idea behind an agentic application. It's not just code. It's an AI that can work autonomously to achieve a specific coding goal. And Gemini 2.5 Pro is also showing some serious skills in transforming and editing existing code, which is a big deal for developers.
Okay, that is huge. So AI that can basically code by itself. And what about the benchmarks? How is it actually performing on those coding tests?
On SW Mensch Verified, which is like the industry gold standard for evaluating how well AI agents can handle real-world software engineering tasks, Gemini 2.5 Pro scored, get this, 63.8% using a custom agent setup. That's a massive improvement over previous models.
That is a huge jump. And I remember Theo mentioning this example that sounded almost too good to be true. Something about Gemini 2.5 Pro creating an entire video game from a single line of text input.
Yeah, it does sound kind of sci-fi, but that's the example they use to illustrate the model's reasoning capabilities applied to code generation. Basically, you give it a high-level description like, imagine a simple platformer game with a character who can jump and collect coins, and the model takes that and generates all the executable code needed to actually bring that game to life.
Whoa, that is pretty wild. But Theo also pointed out some things to keep in mind, right? He said these thinking models can still struggle with some of the complexities of real-time code editing, especially in those integrated development environments, like Cursor.
Yeah, that's an important point. So while these models are becoming amazing at generating code from scratch, using them for that really intricate interactive editing within a live coding environment, it's not quite as seamless yet. You might encounter some lag, and that thinking process that's so great for generation can sometimes feel a little less intuitive when you're trying to make those rapid-fire changes in real time.
Okay, so there are still some kinks to work out. And he also brought up this idea of gaslighting in the context of code-related tasks. And he used this example of a ball and a hexagon prompt. What was that all about?
Ah, yes. That was interesting. The point he was making is that with these super advanced reasoning models, their deep understanding and ability to hold all this context in mind can sometimes lead to unexpected interpretations or even errors in their reasoning about the task at hand. In the example with the ball and hexagon, he'd seen cases where the models, in their attempt to reason about physics, would actually simulate gravity incorrectly and make the ball move upwards instead of downwards.
So almost like the AI can overthink things and come up with a wrong, but still kind of plausible answer.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even with these sophisticated reasoning abilities, these models aren't perfect. They can still trip up and give you confidently wrong answers based on their internal thought processes.
That's definitely something to keep in mind, folks. Okay, so we've talked about reasoning, coding, the potential pitfalls. What other cool features and capabilities define Gemini 2.5 Pro?
Well, it's definitely building on the strengths we've seen in the whole Gemini family, especially its native multimodality.
Right, its ability to understand and work with not just text, but also audio, images, video, and code all within the same model. That's already pretty amazing.
Yeah, totally. But probably the biggest leap forward, and this is something that'll really impact you, the user, is the massive expansion of the context window. We're talking about a 1 million token context window now, and 2 million tokens is coming soon.
That is huge. Now, for those of you who aren't deep in the AI world, what does that context window actually mean, and why should you care?
Think of the context window as the amount of information the AI can hold in its mind and consider when it's generating a response. 1 million tokens. That's enormous. Theo mentioned it's roughly equivalent to hundreds of thousands of words, like a whole stack of books.
Whoa.
Yeah. And this means the Gemini 2.5 Pro can understand incredibly large data sets and handle really complex problems by drawing on all sorts of different sources of information at the same time. For you, that could mean analyzing entire research papers, having the AI summarize lengthy email threads without losing the plot, or even working with entire code repositories, huge documents, or tons of transcribed audio and video.
So instead of feeding the AI info bit by bit, you can basically give it the whole picture at once.
Exactly. And it allows for much more nuanced understanding and a better ability to maintain coherence over much longer, more complex interactions. It's like having a conversation with someone who can remember everything you've ever told them. Beyond just the sheer size, though, Google's models also have some other really valuable tricks up their sleeve,
Oh, like what?
like grounding, which essentially means that the model has built-in access to Google Search.
So it can fact check itself, basically.
Yep, in real time, which keeps the information fresh and accurate. And then there's the image parsing, which allows the model to understand the content of images, and the newly added image editing features, which further enhance its versatility when it comes to working with multiple modes of input.
Theo actually gave a really cool example of this in action with that messy music blog. Can you refresh our memory on that?
Oh, yeah. He had this ancient, super cluttered music blog with tons of embedded YouTube and SoundCloud links just buried deep within the HTML source code. He first gave it to Gemini Flash, the faster, more lightweight version, and asked it to write a JavaScript script to pull out all those links. What's fascinating is that Flash, even without being explicitly asked for the links, was able to correctly identify and extract them from this huge chunk of HTML code. We're talking like 71,000 tokens, 222,000 characters.
It's amazing.
It is. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, but the AI does it instantly. And then he tested Gemini 2.5 Pro on the same messy blog, and it also nailed it, which shows how powerful these models are at handling huge amounts of unstructured data.
That's incredibly useful. And he also mentioned native PDF support, right?
Yes, another really practical feature for you. Gemini can now directly process PDF documents, and this is the cool part. It can parse not just the text, but also the images, graphs, and charts that are embedded in those PDFs.
Okay, so it's like a super-powered research assistant that can understand everything in a document.
Exactly. It opens up so many possibilities for analyzing complex reports and finding insights that other models might miss.
All right, so we've got this highly intelligent model, incredible reasoning, coding skills, multimodal capabilities, massive memory. Theo made a pretty strong case for why he thinks Google has a real advantage in this whole AI race. What were his key points?
He boils it down to three core ingredients for building successful AI models: data, science, and hardware. And he argues that Google has a significant edge in all three.
Okay, let's break those down one by one, starting with data.
So Google has been running these core internet services like Search, Gmail, YouTube for decades. That gives them access to an absolutely mind-boggling amount of data. We're not talking about just quantity, though. The quality of the data and the sophisticated ways they've developed over the years to filter and categorize it all, it's unmatched. Theo had this great line: you can't really build an AI that's smarter than the data it learns from.
Makes sense. You need good fuel to power a high-performance engine.
Exactly. And then there's the science aspect. Here, Theo emphasizes Google's long history of leadership in AI research and machine learning. He even pointed out that Google Translate was an early example of some of the key ideas behind large language models, like predicting the next word based on what came before, that whole concept. Google's been at the forefront of this field for a long time, so they have this deep understanding of how it all works.
Okay, so they have the data, the deep knowledge, the expertise. What about the hardware side of things?
So historically, the AI world has been heavily reliant on NVIDIA GPUs. Those are super powerful. But Theo points out that Google is different from a lot of the other major players in that they're actually developing their own custom AI hardware called tensor processing units, or TPUs for short.
Okay, and why is it such a big deal to design and build your own hardware?
Because it gives you this incredibly tight integration between your AI research teams and your hardware engineers. They can essentially design their models from the ground up to be perfectly optimized for their TPU infrastructure, which can lead to big gains in performance and energy efficiency. Other AI companies, without that direct control over the hardware, they have to build their models to run on more general-purpose hardware or hardware from another company, which can be less efficient.
So it's like they're building both the engine and the car, making sure everything fits perfectly together.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Theo also touched on companies like Grok, who specialize in building really, really fast inference hardware. He showed this demo of Grok running a distilled version of the Llama model, and it was blazing through this advent of code challenge at incredible speed. While Grok's hardware is amazing at speed, it might not be quite as versatile in terms of the range of AI models it can handle.
Right. And then there were these charts comparing intelligence versus speed and intelligence versus price. What were your main takeaways from those?
Those charts were really interesting. They highlighted Gemini's strong position compared to other models out there, especially Gemini Flash. It's looking really impressive in terms of its speed and cost effectiveness, especially when you compare it to other models with similar performance levels. Theo even suggested that it could end up being something like 25 times less expensive than a comparable model. We don't have pricing for the new Pro models yet, but this definitely suggests that Google could be very competitive on that front too.
So high performance and affordability, that's a good combo.
Definitely. He also shared this stat that really stood out. Over 1 million messages were sent using Gemini on T3 Chat, and the total cost was way lower than a much smaller number of messages sent using Claude. That shows you the potential value for the user.
Wow, that's a big difference. And he also talked a bit about Apple and the challenges they're facing in the AI space. What's his take on that?
He thinks Apple is lagging behind a bit because of their strong focus on user privacy, which has limited how much data they can collect to train their AI models. He also suggests that they haven't invested as heavily in AI research historically compared to other tech giants.
Right. And while their hardware is super efficient for their devices, it's not necessarily optimized for these really demanding AI workloads.
Exactly. They're great at integrating hardware and software, but their focus is more on things like battery life and user experience, not raw AI processing power.
Interesting. Okay, so Google seems to have this unique combination of data, scientific expertise, and custom-built hardware, which could give them a real leg up in the AI race. Let's shift gears now and talk about how all this incredible tech is actually becoming accessible to, well, regular people. Julian Goldie, in his video, he showed how to build AI agents using the free API for Gemini 2.5 Pro Experimental. That's pretty cool.
It is. It really opens up a lot of possibilities. He was using this platform called N8N, which is a free open source workflow automation platform. And he showed how you can connect to that Gemini 2.5 Pro Experimental API and build custom AI agents to do all sorts of things.
So you don't need to be a coding genius to start experimenting with this stuff.
Nope. And that's what's so exciting. He emphasized that both N8N, if you choose to self-host it, and that experimental Gemini 2.5 Pro API key, which you can get from Google AI Studio, they're both free right now. So you can actually start playing around with this powerful AI without spending a dime.
Love that. So what kind of AI agents was he actually building?
He started with the basics, showing how to connect to the Gemini 2.5 Pro experimental model within N8N. He actually tried to use Open Router at first, but it wasn't working right at the time. So he ended up connecting directly using the Google Gemini chat model option, which worked perfectly. Then he walked through how to get your free API key from Google AI Studio and how to plug it into the credentials section in N8N.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. And then, bam, he showed how to create a basic chat bot right within N8N.
Okay, so someone with zero AI experience could basically build their own little conversational AI.
Exactly. But he didn't stop there. He then showed how to add memory to the chatbot, which means it can remember past interactions, making it much more, conversational.
Much more human-like.
Yeah. He set it to remember the last 15 interactions so it could keep track of what you were talking about. That's way more sophisticated than just a simple question and answer bot.
For sure. What about connecting it to other tools? That's where things can get really interesting.
Absolutely. He showed how to integrate it with Gmail, which was super cool. He gave this simple prompt like, send an email to me, juliangoldie.com, inviting him to the Google Pro Gemini experimental party. And the AI automatically filled in the recipient, the subject line, and the whole email body, then sent it off. Just like that.
So you've got this AI assistant that can actually take actions in the real world, send emails, schedule meetings.
Mm-hmm.
What else did he demo?
He then took it up another notch and showed how to integrate it with WordPress, turning the AI into an SEO assistant. He walked through setting up a system message, basically, instructions to tell the AI to act as a helpful SEO assistant focused on generating blog content. He used this content prompt to have the AI write an SEO-optimized article based on a keyword, in his case, SEO Training London. And then get this, the AI could publish that article directly to WordPress.
Wow, that's amazing.
And he even showed how to format the output in HTML so it looks perfect on the website.
So smart. But the big question with all these AI-generated content tools is always, is it any good?
Right. Well, Julian tested the content with this AI content detection tool called Zero GPT. And get this, at the time of testing, it came back with a 0% AI detection score. That suggests it was really high quality, human-like content.
Very impressive.
And he really emphasized how easy it is to import and set up these AI agent workflows in N8N using JSON files.
So no need to be a coding wizard to get started.
Exactly. And he mentioned that his community, the AI Profit Boardroom, has even more advanced pre-built workflows and templates that people can use, including agents for all sorts of things, like managing MCP servers, SEO automation, email and content creation, social media management, even video generation. He showed an example of an AI avatar video, which was pretty cool. He also talked about the active community they have for support and these weekly Q&A calls where you can get help in real time.
That's fantastic. It really seems like there's a whole ecosystem growing up around this tech, making it more accessible to everyone. Now, there was a really important point that Theo brought up towards the end of his video, something to keep in mind about the API access and how much you can actually see into the thinking process of Gemini 2.5 Pro. What was his concern?
Yeah, this is something to be aware of. So in Google AI Studio, you can actually see Gemini 2.5 Pro thinking. Like it shows you the steps it's taking, the reasoning it's going through before it arrives at a final answer. But Theo discovered that this detailed thinking data is not currently available through the API.
So if you're using the API, you're kind of in the dark about how the AI is actually arriving at its answers.
Yeah, basically, you just get the final output, but no insight into the step-by-step process.
I see. Why do you think that is?
Theo speculated that it might be a technical challenge, like it's just really complicated to expose that level of detail through the API. Or it could be a strategic decision on Google's part. Maybe they want to keep that level of insight exclusive to their own platform for now. But he made a strong point that having access to that thinking data through the API would be super valuable for developers.
I can see that. If you're building applications on top of the API, you want to know how it's getting to its conclusions.
Right. It would make the results more transparent, easier to debug, and it could really increase trust in the output, especially for critical applications.
So, something to be aware of, folks. Okay, so to wrap things up for you, we've got a lot to digest here. Gemini 2.5 Pro looks like a major step forward for AI. It's showing off impressive intelligence, reasoning, and coding abilities, all backed by a huge context window and powerful multimodal features.
And Google's position with the data, the science, and the hardware, it seems like that's giving them a real edge in this space.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the long run. And the accessibility of Gemini 2.5 Pro through that free API is opening up so many possibilities for people to build custom AI agents, like those N8N integrations Julian showed us.
But as Theo pointed out, that lack of API access to the underlying thinking process is definitely something to keep in mind. Hopefully Google will address that in the future.
Fingers crossed. Okay, as we close out this deep dive, here's a final thought for you to chew on. Given all these rapid advancements and the direction Google seems to be heading, what future applications of this kind of powerful, increasingly accessible AI do you find the most exciting? Or maybe even a little bit concerning? What questions does this whole deep dive raise for you about how AI is evolving and how it's going to be integrated into our lives and our work? It's something to think about. Thanks for diving in with us.
Hey everyone! Thanks for watching our podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. See you next time.